Welcome to this episode of Value Talks. My name is Travis Tassett. I'm sitting down today with Dan Tassett again, and we're going to talk about planning for the new year. What every business leader should know. Dan, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So let's talk about the new year, and what often comes with the new year is New Year's resolutions.
Right.
So I'm curious to what you think about New Year's resolutions.
Well, it's almost become a tradition for people to talk about what's your New Year's resolution, and that's all fine and dandy, and it's great. But the facts are that I think I've seen a study that 95% of all New Year's resolutions will be broken by Valentine's Day. And while it's kind of a fun tradition, kind of funny that would actually occur, it's really quite sad, in my opinion, because what people really do, some people, and we all should do, is we should take opportunity to renew ourselves each year and to set new goals. And I think it's just sad that there isn't more discussion around what could you do to sustain it so that 95% of all New Year's resolutions aren't broken. So it actually results in somebody being more, doing more with their life.
I mean, most organizations go through a process each year annually,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you just want to briefly touch on just
Well, I'm a big believer in business planning process, and that while it makes sense to set goals, if there's not a process around setting those goals and something before it and something that comes after, then you're going to be less successful as a company or as an organization. So I'm just adamant that any company that we invest in or we have ownership in has a business planning process, and that process starts with vision, mission, purpose. What do we want to be? What do we want to aspire to be? A vision. What do we want to be, do, and have? And then, a process of going around it, and what's our battle cry, and what's the reason that we exist as an organization. So a business planning process for a company starts with vision, mission, purpose. You establish some, standard of contact, code of behavior, culture, if you will. And then you kind of look and say, what is going on in the industry? What are the drivers of our strategy as an organization? Maybe do a SWOT analysis and, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And then you start developing a strategic map. You say, what are our strategy for this year? And then from that, you say, let's set some specific short-term, long-term goals. Notice how much came before you actually set goals. Mm-hmm. And then as you establish those goals, you think, okay, how are we going to accomplish that goals? What disciplines are we going to put in place? What initiatives are we going to put in place? What habits are we going to develop as an organization to help us accomplish those goals? And then you measure against those goals on a regular periodic basis so you can determine whether you're getting closer to accomplishing and bridging that gap. Measure against that, and then you reward people and or hold them accountable and celebrate the wins and make changes where changes need to be made. That's the business planning process for an organization. We want everything that we invest in to do that. And it works. It's proven. It comes by a lot of different names. You have people write books. You have companies and organizations that develop what's called a balanced scorecard. You can go on and on and on. It has a lot of different names, but all is the same thing. It's the same process, and it's proven to work. And it separates successful companies from non-successful companies.
Sure.
Unsuccessful.
So let's make this a little more personable for everybody. How does that business planning process, that annual process, trickle down, and what does that look like for the individual, the leaders of every organization, or just me as an individual person? Let's say I'm not even a worker, I'm a wife, I'm a husband. What does that look like for us as individuals?
Yeah, great question. One of the reasons why I agreed to do this podcast, Travis, and is so that you could take it, and we were done, and distribute it amongst our company, our leaders, and I'd share it with outside as well. And this will be posted, as are others, on our websites. But I want our leaders in our organization, and virtually everybody is a leader in some way, shape, or form, either at home or at work. And even if you don't lead down, you lead up, and right. So I just want this shared with our whole organization. If you took a very impersonal approach to this and said, how should you develop as a leader or an individual? It would be really the same process you go through as a business. But if I use those same terms, it becomes a little less personal.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to follow the same process for you to describe how it would happen with an individual. And I'll use different terminology, but essentially it means the same thing as what you would in a business. So, you might look and say, okay, well, New Year's resolution, I want to set a goal. This is what I want to accomplish. That might be the equivalent of a vision for an organization. And then the very next thing that you would, most people do, which is why New Year's resolutions are broken, is because they stop with the goal. And if you notice the comparison I did in business, there's a whole bunch that comes before it. And that's the part where I think if you're an individual, before you start setting a goal for yourself, you should really ask not even how am I going to accomplish the goal, what's the how, but you should ask the question, which is the who. Who do you want to be? What sort of a father do you want to be? What sort of a sibling do you want to be? A brother, sister? What sort of a leader do you want to be? A leader of your department, a group vice president, a vice president, a president, a CEO, chairman, just a leader of your department. Who do you want to be? Because if you know who you want to be, then it makes the how a lot easier. And so I think for me, that's the starting point.
I'm glad that you started with vision. I mean, we're going to share probably quotes throughout this like we do in every one of our podcasts, but Warren Bennis is kind of the father of leadership, at least, really kind of gave birth to the movement of leadership. Said that leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. So whether we're, leaders at work or at home, big believer that, we're all leaders, it all starts with that vision. And so we have to have that first.
Yeah, I agree. It just will make determining the how a lot easier. It'll hold you more consistent. If you say to yourself, listen, I want to be thought of, by my children as a great father. And then you'll start thinking of, okay, how do I do that? What is it that I need to put in place? What disciplines or strategies or habits do I need to maintain so that I am known and that's who I become, a great father? And same's true in leadership of your department or whatever that might be.
Okay, so once we start with the vision, then we can move on to the vision is the who, then we can move on to how
Right.
we're going to go about accomplishing that vision that we have for ourselves. So what's kind of how does the how start?
Well,
what are the steps to that in your
Yeah, I think you can put a number of steps, but in my mind, I always like to take, particularly early in the year, I like to, and again, this is not a business planning process. This is a individual development thought process. And let's just talk about being a better leader. Let's talk about that role, regardless of what that might be. What I'm absolutely convinced of, there's three things that you need to put in place in order to execute on the how.
Okay.
The number one thing is you have to have the discipline in place to start doing certain things. In other words, we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to actually do it. I'm going to have the fortitude to say, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to start doing it now. Again, that sounds so easy, but it really is. In fact, a lot of people say, well, I would like to start doing this, and but they never really just I'd really like to get healthy, and I'd like to start exercising, but the hardest part of jogging is putting your shoes on and getting out the door. That's the most difficult part.
Yeah.
And it's true with every aspect of what you're wanting to do regarding the how. So I'm absolutely convinced, just start. Get out of bed in the morning and start doing it. And that's the beginning.
Two quick quotes. Amelia Earhart, one of my favorite quotes of hers is, "The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity."
There you go.
And oftentimes I find out people want to act, but they're maybe overwhelmed with where to start. And another quote that I love is, "Begin anywhere." Like sometimes people are so overwhelmed. Do I start here? It doesn't matter. Just start, right? That decision is the stepping stone.
Yeah, and I guess as part of that too, when you make the decision to start, when you first ask the question, who do I want to be? I want to be a leader who is disciplined, who is well thought of, who is respected, who people love to follow. And if that's who you want to be, and you say, I'm going to start to be that person, the very next question you will ask yourself is, okay, what is it that I need to start doing?
Yeah.
Specifically. So now you're starting to put tactics in place and disciplines in place, habits in place, to be able to become who you want to become.
So assuming one flushes that out, they articulate that vision, they start to define the habits that they need to have in place, they make the decision to act, they start to develop those tactics, those strategies. What's the next step?
Well, this is going to sound it's almost the opposite of the decision to start. It's the courage to stop. You're like, well, that's confusing. It's really not, because I'm absolutely convinced, and particularly, I've had a lot of successes in my life and I've had failures in my life. And as I start to study the difference between those two and what's the commonality in the success, it's when I started to begin to understand that less is more. In other words, I could accomplish more by doing less. So I started a long time ago, when I started to experience success and tried to study what that was about, I started to cut more and more things out of my day. I stopped having long meetings. I stopped participating in all the meetings I felt like I needed to participate in. I maybe said, I'm going to stop watching television so much because it doesn't feel like I have time. So I look at it, I need a little bit more time. I need more time at work. Well, I don't want to take away from family. I need more time with family. How do I get that? Stop watching TV as much, right? And so, although relaxation and time off is critically important, but I started to look and how many hours I was spending doing it, stop doing that. So every year, at the beginning each year, I always say, I want to have the courage and the tenacity to get out the door, put my shoes on and get going and start something new. But I also do the same thing and say, I'm going to stop doing this. Less is more. You can accomplish more by doing less. And I just ask all of our leaders and everybody out there to just say, what can I stop doing that would enable me to do other things more or better?
I'm glad you brought up the word courage there, because it does take courage, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It absolutely does.
Why do you think that is? I mean,
Well,
what's that about?
Well, first of all, I think it takes courage to both start doing things, and it takes courage to stop doing things.
It does, yeah.
Because some of the things that you're doing, you may like, or it may be a comfort to you, and maybe even an addiction to you.
Maybe a distraction, yeah.
Maybe a distraction, and so change in general, it takes courage to change. But that's what life is about, and those who have succeed change, and they change regularly, because if you're not changing, you're not growing, and so the two are synonymous. And so I think that it requires that change, and it requires courage to do that.
You know, the second thing that it made me think of, we've talked recently about the concept of via negativa, which is a Latin phrase of basically thinking about things in a negative sense, or it was from Christian theology, a way of contemplating the Creator, the divine, in terms of not what it is, but what it isn't. So it just makes me think of, you know, as leaders, as individuals, in order to be who we want to be, sometimes it is, you know, just removing the things that prevent us from becoming.
That's another way of saying the whole thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we can apply that to our life individually as well as professionally. So that's the second step, having the courage to maybe, you know, stop doing certain things. What you said, there was three pieces. What's the third?
Well, the third one
piece?
is to really, again, have the courage or to delegate, and I just call it have empowering. Find a person to empower. And first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind when I think is, well, yeah, sure, I need more resources, and I got to hire more people. No, there's people out there that are currently part of the organization, that are part of your family, part of whatever, that would love to have more opportunity to become more themselves. And so in order to become more themselves, they have to be willing to start something. And that may be as simple as somebody allowing them and empowering them to start something, particularly if you have subordinates. So I think the third element of this is to find a person to empower and to give work to. And I think as a result of that, here's the way I like to look at it. And when I've had the most success in my life, I've read different people. Delegation, I think there's been a lot of books written on the subject matter. If you can find somebody to do your job or some task you're doing, if they can do it 90% or 80% as well as you can, you should be delegating and empowering them to do it. I would lower that bar way down. I would say if you can find somebody to do it half as well as you do, but they have room to grow, then delegate it and let them do it. And there's a reason for that, because they'll feel valued.
It's an engagement, yeah.
They'll be engaged. They'll grow personally. You can focus your energy somewhere else and do things that maybe bring higher value. The organization, therefore, will then thrive. And so what I always like to, and I've learned in recent years, is you can't control everything and grow. It doesn't work that way. You can have one or the other. If you want to grow, you have to empower others, because it helps them, they grow, gives you a chance to do other things, and the organization itself will thrive and grow. So I just encourage our leaders all across our organization listening to this podcast, and I know it's been distributed like our others have. Whether you're a CEO of a facility or whatever, owner of a business or whatever it might be, even running a department, or just, again, if you're leading up, I would just encourage you to empower other people so that you can do more yourself.
There's numerous people have been attributed to this quote, but the quote is, you can do anything but not everything.
Yeah.
So it's more about what's the best use of my time, talent, and energy as a leader, and what is maybe something I can tee up for someone else to, again, help them grow. I mean, why else do we hire smart people? I mean, why hire smart people if we're not going to give them the opportunity to commit their talents and
well, Steve Jobs had an interesting quote. He said, we don't hire smart people and then tell them what to do. Why would we do that? That's just stupid. We hire smart people so they can tell us what we need to do.
Absolutely. Love that quote. All right, so we talked about kind of the starting with kind of the vision, and then being able to, once we determine the who, that allows us to determine the how. And you talked about, just getting started and kind of taking that first step is have the discipline to get started, and then having the courage to stop doing perhaps some things. And then the third piece being the confidence to delegate.
Right.
So where do we go wrong? Where do we get crossways? Where do we fail? What are your thoughts on that? Because a lot of people set out to do this every year, and then they fail to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So,
Yeah,
assuming they did 1, 2, and 3 of the how, they're delegating, they're acting, they're stopping certain things. Why else do you think they fail?
Yeah, that people focus on the what or the goal rather than on the how or the strategy. And I just think it's interesting if we could dive a little deeper on that for a minute. And this is if you just think about this, it's pretty profound. If the what is the goal, I would argue that everybody has the same goals. It's the how that's different. So
Meaning we all want to be happy.
well,
We
sure.
all want to be
how many
successful.
People, how many
we
people,
all want to be.
Sure. How many people get married and say, yeah, I want to, if we could 5 years and then we'll get a divorce and go to court and we'll fight and we'll divide stuff up. Nobody does that, right? You get married, you expect, you want to stay married the rest of your life. Or a sports team. We're going to put together a team and, let's just win half of our games.
Let's just go out there and compete.
Yeah, let's just go out and let's not get beat by more than 20 points, right? I mean, nobody does that. You want to win the game.
Right.
So you all have the same goal. The question is, why are some people successful and why are unsuccessful? Why are some companies successful? Why is it some individual successful? And I guess I would propose to you that the difference is the systems or the processes they put in place, which is the how am I going to do this, the strategies, the disciplines, the habits, all those things. When you lump them together, that is the system of how I'm going to get from here to here. How do I bridge the gap from where I am today to where I'm going to be successful, or I'm going to accomplish who I want to become? And that's the difference. That's the difference between success and non-success. And if you just break those down, you can call it discipline, you can call it habit, you can call it initiatives, you can call it systems, you can call it processes. But you compile those all together. What does Sean Covey said that I think his quote is, "Habits will make or break you because we become what we repeatedly do." And I love that quote. Another quote by James Clear: "You don't rise to the level of your goals or to your what. You fall to the level of your systems." And I think that just says it all. That you have to have those initiatives in place on how you're going to accomplish something, and that makes all the difference in the world. A goal: I'm going to have X dollars in savings by the end of the year. That's great. What's the system you're going to put in place to do that? The system I'm going to put in place is I'm going to have X dollars deducted from every paycheck, and I'm going to invest that at this percent of interest, and this percent I'm going to invest in the stock market. It's a system. It's a process. It's a discipline. It's a habit of doing certain things that helps you achieve success, as opposed to just setting a what. You determine the how. So understanding the how, is almost more important than the what. Makes sense?
Yeah, completely. I mean, a lot of us know very well what the what is, but the how is probably the missing point. And that system of accountability and support in a lot of ways.
So the second thing, Travis, that I think keep people from accomplishing being successful and for failing on their New Year's resolutions is that they get discouraged because they don't see progress, or they don't see enough progress. And if you just have a clear understanding of it's the little consistent things that you do over time that build up and achieve and accomplish success. Whether it is, if you want to become a great disciplined, respected leader in your team, your organization. That just doesn't happen overnight. But it's a buildup of little consistent things that you might do. Notes of encouragement, uh, patience that you show, the time you spend with somebody, um, good thought-provoking discussion, good leadership, good conversation, authentic conversation, sincere, fierce conversation. A build up becomes and gets you to that point. Losing weight. I mean, you don't go in and lose weight. Overnight. It's a discipline of consistently exercising. It's a discipline, the habit of eating the right food, that causes that to happen over time. And I think what people get discouraged is that they begin to feel the change inside, but
Hasn't manifested
it hasn't
yet.
manifested itself, and people don't see the change, and they get discouraged, and therefore take that and fall by the wayside. So that New Year's resolution, because they aren't driven by who and don't understand the how, now that goal, that what, starts falling by the wayside, and it's just unfortunate. And so, a great metaphor that analogy that I've heard is that. Is water, boiling water. So if you put water on the stove at 70 degrees and turn up the heat, and it gets to 100, and it gets to 150, gets to 200, gets to 213 degrees, it still looks, the external, identical to what it did at 70 degrees. But when it goes from 213 degrees to 214, it starts to boil. And so it's this gradual buildup that you don't see from the outside. And unfortunately, it's what people don't even see from the inside. But as you start doing certain habits, certain disciplines, certain initiatives that become part of your life as a leader, as a father, whatever your role might be, and whatever you determine who you want to be in that role and the how, you need to have the fortitude to stick with it and keep doing it, because it's building up and it will manifest itself in time. So I think that's number two.
I mean, there's clearly a delay. I mean, what I'm doing today, maybe the results won't manifest themselves today, but they will in time. And you're just saying, stick with it, right?
Right.
Stick with it. I mean, we have all these sayings in our culture of inch by inch, it's a cinch, yard by yard, it's hard. A journey of 1,000 steps begins with a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So stick with it, have that fortitude.
Gradually, then all of a sudden, that's a quote that I've heard you say time and time again.
Gradually, then suddenly. That's the Hemingway quote from how someone became, in his novel, how someone lost all their money. They did it gradually, then suddenly. So the inverse of that would be true in terms of how we succeed. It would be gradually, then suddenly as well. So any other reasons in your mind of why people fail?
Well, here's the one that I don't know about this one, but this seemed maybe a little bit funky. But I often wonder why people, they have this identity of themselves. I'm impatient.
I'm stubborn.
I'm stubborn. I have a short fuse. I have, I'm quiet. I'm whatever. I'm undisciplined or whatever. I do things at the last minute. I'm, spontaneous. Whatever it might be. They let that built-in identity of themselves. It almost sabotages the who that they want to become. It sabotages the goal, the what, and it sabotages the initiative, the discipline, the habit that they want to form to get there. And I just look at it and I wonder to myself, I heard somebody the other day, they were offered a cigarette. No, I don't know, maybe, but I'm trying to smoke. I'm trying to stop smoking. I'm sorry. I'm like, why would you say, if you're offered and you want to quit smoking, why would you tell somebody I'm trying to stop smoking? Why wouldn't you just say,
I don't smoke.
I don't smoke. I don't smoke. And so I just encourage all of our leaders, when you determine the who you want to become, I want to see people become all that they can become. and you've given me a great quote around it. I don't remember the quote itself, but it was, when you see people as they are,
Oh, yeah.
you make them worse. If you see them as they could become, you make them better. I would add my own quote behind that, which was, and you see them as their creator sees them. But I just would encourage everybody to not let this old identity of yourself, as if you're incapable of doing anything different, sabotage your resolution, sabotage who you want to become this year, and how you're going to become that person, and the goals that you set, so that by the Valentine's Day, they're not all wrecked and flown by the wayside. Talk about yourself in a positive way and see yourself in the light of that person you want to become. And talk about yourself as if you've already become that person. And let who lead the entire year.
I mean, we're often our own worst enemies.
Right.
And
Exactly.
one thing that you've often, taught me at a young age was to use the right words. And, the language of winners is different than the language of losers. If I could just use that, kind of those broad brushstrokes. And the losers are making excuses, and the winners are going to say, how am I going to figure this out? And so don't sell yourself short to the people that are listening along with us. One quick example is oftentimes people will say, I can't afford that. And what they should be asking themselves is, how can I afford that?
Right.
That opens up possibilities when we ask ourselves those questions. So, Dan, I just want to, thank you for your time today. If you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave us with, I mean, to me, I'm setting with the words, hold the vision for who I want to be, for myself, my family, and then trust the process. So any closing thoughts?
Yeah,
Dan?
just the closing thoughts would be, just don't take on too much. Don't take on too many new who's that you want to be. Make it simple. Start in a very simple way. And as you start developing the disciplines or the new habits you want to create for yourself, don't get too many. As if, I assure you, if you do too many, you won't accomplish, you won't do any of them. Just start small, keep it. Even 1, 2, or 3 would be better than putting a whole bunch out there and not accomplishing anything. And I just want this clear message for everybody in our organization, anybody in that leadership role, that you can become more if you'll just follow the disciplines that we talked about here. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.